The invincible empire emerges. The Xal'Zur Dominion had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. Their warships controlled the vastness of space, and their armies crushed any resistance before it could rise. They were the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, their power unmatched, their dominance unquestioned. No species had ever stood against them and survived. Their conquest was simple. When they arrived at a planet, they offered one choice: surrender or be destroyed. Those who resisted were wiped out, their worlds burned, their names erased from history. The Xal'Zur had no mercy, no compassion, no weakness. They believed they were the natural rulers of the universe, chosen by destiny to conquer all life. Their fleets were unstoppable, their technology centuries ahead of any other species. Even the bravest warriors of other civilizations trembled at the sight of their war banners. The Xal'Zur did not fight wars. They ended them before they could begin. And now, their eyes turned toward a new world, a blue planet floating on the edge of the galaxy, a world called Earth. The arrival of the Xal'Zur. From the depths of space, a massive fleet approached the Sol system. The first fleet of conquest, led by Supreme Admiral Valzoran, was given a simple mission: bring Earth into the Dominion or destroy it. Valzoran had conquered over 100 worlds. He had never lost a battle. He had seen civilizations beg for mercy before being crushed beneath the might of the Dominion. To him, Earth was nothing more than another weak, primitive planet. As his flagship, the Eternal Wrath, entered the system, he studied the data about the humans. They were young. Their civilization was only a few thousand years old. They were small, only one planet, a few colonies on their moon and Mars. They were technologically weak. Their ships could barely travel between planets. Their weapons were nothing compared to the Dominion's. Valzoran smirked. Another easy conquest. He ordered his fleet forward, thousands of warships surrounding Earth's orbit. His voice echoed through the fleet's communication channels. Humans, you are now part of the Xal'Zur Dominion. Surrender your planet, your resources, and your people, or be destroyed. Silence. For a moment, he thought the humans were too terrified to respond. But then, a single message appeared on his screen. It was short, simple, and unexpected. If you seek war, we will bring you hell. Valzoran laughed. These creatures are fools. He ordered the fleet to prepare for bombardment. And that was when everything went wrong. The first sign of resistance. Without warning, alarms rang across the Eternal Wrath. The crew panicked, struggling to understand what was happening. Something was interfering with their systems. Valzoran's eyes narrowed. Report. Sir, we're losing connection with several ships. Impossible. Valzoran snapped. Find out what's happening. Then, without explanation, a Xal'Zur warship exploded. Another ship vanished from the radar. Then another. Valzoran's heart pounded. This was no accident. The humans were fighting back. But how? How could a primitive species do this to the mighty Xal'Zur Dominion? A new kind of enemy. For the first time in his life, Valzoran felt uncertainty. The humans had not surrendered. They had not begged for mercy. Instead, they had attacked first. And whatever weapon they were using, it was beyond anything he had seen before. Suddenly, a shadow appeared on the Eternal Wrath's main screen. A human ship. It was small, black as the void, barely visible against the darkness of space. It shouldn't have been a threat. And yet, the moment the human ship appeared, 3 more Xal'Zur warships exploded. Valzoran's breath caught. For the first time, the Xal'Zur Dominion had encountered something they did not understand. And deep in his mind, a terrifying thought formed. Have we made a mistake? The beginning of the end. Across the Xal'Zur fleet, panic spread. The invincible empire had been challenged. Valzoran clenched his fists. No, he refused to believe these creatures were a threat. He would crush them, like all the others. But as another warship vanished from the radar, he couldn't ignore one simple truth. Humanity was not afraid. And that, more than anything, was dangerous. The first strike. Valzoran stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the main screen. Another explosion. Another Xalzur warship gone. It didn't make sense. The humans were primitive. Their technology was inferior. And yet, the mighty Xalzur fleet, a force that had crushed countless civilizations, was being torn apart. "Find them," he roared. His officers scrambled, scanning for the source of the attacks, but the enemy ships were nowhere to be seen. And then, a voice echoed through the fleet's communication channels. A human voice. Cold. Calculated. "Welcome to the real war." The ghosts of space. Valzoran clenched his fists. Fire at Wyl. Xalzur warships unleashed hell. Energy beams, plasma cannons, and missile barrages tore through the darkness. But they hit nothing. The enemy was there, but invisible. Human ships flickered in and out of existence, appearing just long enough to strike, then vanish. Valzoran's mind raced. How? Were they using cloaking technology? Impossible. Such tech had never worked in direct combat. And yet, here they were. Humanity was fighting like predators, not prey. They didn't stand in formation. They didn't wait to be attacked. They hunted. One by one, Xalzur warships fell. Valzoran's heart pounded. For the first time in his life, he was losing. The weapon no one expected. An urgent alarm rang through the eternal wrath. "Supreme Admiral, we've detected something." "What is it?" Valzoran demanded. "A human weapon, sir. It's not targeting our ships." He frowned. Then what? The ship shook violently. Systems flickered. Weapons powered down. The crew panicked. "We're losing control." Valzoran's blood ran cold. The humans weren't destroying their ships. They were hijacking them. Somehow, human forces had unleashed a cyber weapon that bypassed Dominion firewalls, turning the fleet against itself. Xalzur warships began firing on each other. Confusion. Chaos. The once mighty First Fleet of Conquest was now fighting itself. The turning point. Valzoran knew this wasn't just an attack. It was a message. The humans weren't just resisting. They were showing their power. They had found the Xalzur's weakness. And now, the hunters had become the hunted. Valzoran clenched his teeth. Fall back. Retreat to the outer system. His fleet turned to escape, limping away from the battlefield. But even as they fled, one truth burned in his mind. Humanity was not weak. They were something else entirely. And that Xalzur had made a terrible mistake. They had started a war they might not be able to win. Suspense for the next part. What will the Xalzur do next? How will humanity strike back even harder? Will the mighty empire fall? Humanity's secret weapon. Valzoran sat in the command chair of the eternal wrath, his claws gripping the armrests tightly. The retreat was a humiliation. The First Fleet of Conquest, his fleet, had never lost a battle. Until now. Until humanity. For hours, his officers worked to recover control over their ships. The human cyber weapon had shut down their systems, leaving them defenseless. If the enemy had pressed their attack, the entire fleet would have been wiped out. But they hadn't. That worried him more than anything. The humans wanted them to run. As if they were saying, "Go back to your empire. Tell them what happened. Let them know what's coming." Valzoran had faced many enemies. Some had been strong. Some had been clever. But none had fought like this. This was not a rebellion. This was not a resistance. This was a hunt. And for the first time in Xalzur history, they were the prey. But dark warning. Back on the Xalzur homeworld, Supreme High Lord Xyroth Kal sat on his golden throne, staring at the battle reports. The First Fleet had been crippled. Dozens of warships destroyed or hijacked. thousands of soldiers missing or dead. And worst of all, human casualties were almost zero. This was not possible. He turned his glowing red eyes toward Valzoran, who knelt before him. "You mean to tell me," Xyrothkal said, his voice like a blade, "that an insignificant species defeated the greatest fleet in the galaxy?" Valzoran gritted his teeth. They are not what we expected, my lord." The room fell silent. The High Lord's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. "And you expect me to believe that a species without an empire, without a fleet, without an intergalactic army, broke the Dominion's greatest warriors?" Valzoran lowered his head. "My lord, they do not fight like others. He hesitated. How could he explain it? The humans did not use brute force. They used speed, precision, strategy. They knew the Xal'Zur's weaknesses. They studied them before the war had even begun. This was not just resistance. This was a carefully planned counterattack." Xyrothkal leaned forward. "And what do you suggest we do?" Valzoran looked up. "We cannot fight them like we fight the others. We must wipe them out before they learn too much." The High Lord considered this for a moment. Then he gave the order. "Send the Annihilation Fleet, humanity's greatest strength." Meanwhile, in a secret underground base on Earth, General Elias Carter stood before a holographic projection of the battle. The mission was a success. The First Fleet had been forced to retreat. The Xal'Zur, the so-called Lords of the Galaxy, had been beaten by a species they saw as insignificant. But Carter knew this was only the beginning. The Xal'Zur would come back, stronger. Earth needed to be ready. "How long until the next wave arrives?" Carter asked. A young officer looked at her datapad. "If they send a second fleet, I'd say a few weeks." Carter shook his head. "They won't send a second fleet. They'll send their extermination forces." A silence filled the room. Earth's forces had won the first battle, but Carter knew one thing for certain. The real war had just begun. The Annihilation Fleet approaches. Deep in space, thousands of Xal'Zur warships gathered. The Annihilation Fleet, led by Overlord Karaxvar, was unlike anything humanity had faced before. It was not built for conquest. It was built for erasure. Planets that resisted the Dominion were not allowed to exist. And Earth had just made itself a target. Karaxvar stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Oblivion Spear, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. "Humanity has sealed its fate," he said coldly. "By the time we are done, their world will be nothing but ashes." The fleet moved forward. The countdown to Earth's final battle had begun. Suspense for the next part. Can humanity survive the Annihilation Fleet? What secret weapon do humans still have? Will the Xal'Zur finally understand what they are facing? The fall of a god. Overlord Karaxvar stood on the bridge of the Oblivion Spear, his golden armor reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Before him, the Annihilation Fleet, 10,000 warships, built for one purpose: to erase Earth from existence. He had led countless campaigns, crushed civilizations, and burned entire star systems into nothing but dust. The humans, they were just another problem to be erased. He turned to his communications officer. "Send the transmission." The Xal'Zur fleet broadcast a single message to Earth, translated into every human language. "You had your chance to surrender. Now your world will burn." Then the fleet began its approach. The final battle for Earth had begun. Humanity's response. Deep in an underground command center, General Elias Carter stared at the massive screen in front of him. The Xal'Zur were coming. 10,000 warships. Enough firepower to wipe out every city on Earth. Around him, officers worked furiously, preparing for the largest battle in human history. A young lieutenant spoke. "Sir, they're broadcasting a threat." Carter didn't even blink. Of course they are. The Xal'Zur always used fear as a weapon. They thought humanity would break under the pressure. They thought humans would beg for mercy. They thought wrong. Carter took a deep breath and sent his own transmission to the Xalzur fleet. The message was short. "We heard you. Now listen to us. This is our home, and we're not going anywhere." The trap is set. As the Xalzur fleet moved closer, Overlord Karaxvar felt nothing but confidence. "This will be over in hours," he told his officers. His warships moved into attack formation, preparing to unleash their planet-destroying weapons. But something felt off. The human defenses were too quiet. There were no desperate last-minute evacuations. No panicked attempts at diplomacy. Nothing. It was as if they were waiting. Then the alarms on the Oblivion Spear began screaming. "Overlord," an officer shouted. "Massive energy spikes detected." Karaxvar's eyes narrowed. "Where?" The officer swallowed hard. "In Syar fleet." The ambush. Without warning, the Xalzur warships started exploding. One after another, massive dreadnoughts were torn apart by invisible attacks. Something was inside their ranks, but the sensors couldn't detect it. Then they appeared. Human warships. Black as space. Silent as death. They had been waiting, hidden, using technology that Xalzur did not understand. They had let the enemy move into position, and now they were striking first. Karaxvar's fists clenched. "They used us against ourselves," he growled. The humans had waited for the perfect moment. Now, the Xalzur fleet was trapped, and the slaughter had begun. The fall of the Overlord. Karaxvar refused to believe what was happening. The Annihilation Fleet, the greatest force that Xalzur had ever assembled, was being torn apart. This was not possible. He slammed his fist against his chair. Redirect all forces. Target the human fleet. But it was too late. The humans were not fighting a traditional war. They weren't standing in formation or meeting the enemy head-on. They were hunting, striking from the darkness, disabling engines, hijacking systems, destroying command centers. For every human ship destroyed, 5 Xalzur ships fell. Karaxvar knew then, this wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The breaking point. The bridge of the Oblivion Spear was in chaos. "We've lost half the fleet." An officer shouted. "The humans are inside our systems." Another panicked. "Our weapons are shutting down." Karaxvar gritted his teeth. He had never lost a war. He had crushed dozens of civilizations, erased millions of lives. And now, for the first time in his existence, he understood what those species had felt before they were destroyed. Fear. The mighty overlord of the Xalzur Dominion was afraid. Then the final message came through. A human voice, calm and cold. "You came to burn our world. Now, we burn yours." The transmission ended, and the Oblivion Spear exploded. The collapse of an empire. Across the galaxy, the news spread. The Annihilation Fleet was gone. Earth had survived. And now, the once mighty Xalzur Dominion was broken. Without their greatest fleet, without their overlord, their empire began to fall apart. Other species, once terrified of the Xalzur, now rose up against them. Worlds that had once bowed to the Dominion now declared their freedom. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species they had once called weak, the species they had tried to erase, the species that had defied them, and won. Final suspense for the next part. What happens to the remaining Xalzur forces? Will humanity chase them down, or show mercy? What does this victory mean for the galaxy? The war spreads. The Xalzur Dominion was shaken. For the first time in their long, brutal history, they had been defeated. The Annihilation Fleet was gone. The Overlord was dead. And the terrifying truth spread across the galaxy. The humans had won. The aftermath of the battle. On Earth, in an underground command center, General Elias Carter stood before a massive holographic screen, watching the remains of the Xal'Zur fleet drift lifelessly in space. The battle was over. But the war was just beginning. An officer spoke. "Sir, we've intercepted Xal'Zur transmissions. Their forces across the galaxy are in chaos." Carter narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The officer brought up new data. Other alien species, ones that were enslaved by the Xal'Zur, are rising up. Carter leaned forward. "How many?" The officer hesitated. "Almost every colony under Xal'Zur rule." A slow smile formed on Carter's face. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had started a rebellion, the rise of the resistance. Across the galaxy, species that had been under Xal'Zur rule for centuries now saw an opportunity. If humanity could stand against the Xal'Zur and win, why couldn't they? On the slave world of Varlock 5, the Xal'Zur garrisons woke up to explosions. The Varlookian people, who had been forced to serve their alien overlords, had taken up weapons, stolen Xal'Zur rifles, hacked security drones, repurposed mining tools. For years, they had lived in fear. But now they fought with hope. Hope that humanity had given them. And it wasn't just them. The Drakari clans on the desert moons of Sirith 7 revolted. The Tethran Union, long thought dead, re-emerged to reclaim their lost homeworld. Everywhere, the Xal'Zur forces were being attacked. They were losing control. The last stand of the Xal'Zur. Inside the throne room of the Xal'Zur High Command, Supreme High Lord Xyroth Kal stood before his war council. His face was twisted with rage. "How has this happened?" he demanded. "How has our empire, the greatest in the galaxy, been brought to its knees by these primitives?" His warlords stayed silent, because they knew the truth. The humans were not primitives. They were something far worse. They were relentless. They had survived the Dominion's strongest fleet. They had exposed the weaknesses of Xal'Zur warfare, and now they had turned the entire galaxy against them. A warlord hesitated before speaking. "High Lord, we must consider a retreat." Xyroth Kal's eyes burned with fury. "Retreat," he growled. "You want to run, like cowards, like prey." The warlord lowered his head. "My lord, we have no choice. If we stay, we will be hunted to extinction." Xyroth Kal clenched his fists. The mighty Xal'Zur Dominion was dying. Humanity takes the fight to the stars. Back on Earth, General Carter stood before the assembled United Earth Fleet. Humanity had fought a defensive war. But now they were going on the offensive. "This is our chance," Carter said, addressing the soldiers, pilots, and engineers preparing for battle. "We struck fear into the Xal'Zur. We shattered their fleets. We sparked a rebellion across the stars. Now we finish this." The fleet prepared to launch into space. They would not just defend Earth. They would hunt down the Xal'Zur. And they would end the Dominion once and for all. The Empire crumbles. Across the galaxy, Xal'Zur warlords abandoned their posts. Some fled into deep space, hoping to escape the war. Others tried to hold their ground, only to be overwhelmed by rebel forces. The once feared Xal'Zur were now the ones running. The last remnants of their empire gathered on their homeworld, preparing for their final stand. They had ruled for 10,000 years. But now, they had to face the one thing they had never expected: humanity. Suspense for the next part. Will humanity show mercy or wipe the Xal'Zur out completely? What secrets does the Xal'Zur homeworld hold? Will the rebels unite under humanity, or turn on them? Humanity's last stand. The Xal'Zur Dominion was crumbling. Their fleets were in ruins, their colonies lost, and their once loyal subjects had turned against them. But they were not finished yet. On the throne world of Xal'Xora Prime, the last remnants of the Dominion gathered for a final stand. They had one last weapon, one last desperate hope. A weapon so powerful, so devastating, that it had been locked away for thousands of years, a weapon that could destroy Earth itself. And they were ready to use it. The Doomsday Weapon. Deep beneath the surface of Xalxora Prime, a massive chamber lay hidden. Inside, a group of Zalxur warlords stood before an ancient console. A hologram flickered to life, revealing the image of High Lord Xyroth-Kal. His once mighty voice was now desperate, furious, and full of hatred. "The humans think they have won," he hissed. "They believe they have broken us, but they do not know the full power of the Dominion." The warlords exchanged uneasy glances. The weapon they were about to activate had never been used, not even in the Dominion's darkest wars. It was forbidden. One of the warlords hesitated. "High Lord, if we activate this, we may destroy not just Earth, but ourselves." Xyroth-Kal's eyes burned with rage. "Then we die as rulers, not as prey," he growled. With a single command, the weapon began to power up. A deep, unnatural hum filled the chamber. The planet itself seemed to shudder. And across the galaxy, human sensors picked up the signal. The infiltration mission. Inside the UES Valiant, the command center was in chaos. General Elias Carter stared at the data coming in. "Sir," an officer said, his voice tense, "the Xalxur have activated something." Carter's face darkened. "What do we know?" The answer came from a scientist on the far side of the room. "Whatever it is," she said, "it has the power to wipe out an entire planet." A heavy silence filled the room. They all knew what that meant. Earth was the target. Carter took a deep breath. They had to stop it. And there was only one way. "We're going in," he said. "We'll shut it down from the inside." A small team of elite human commandos was assembled. Their mission was simple, but impossible. Infiltrate Xalxora Prime. Disable the Doomsday Weapon. Escape, if they could. The countdown began, and humanity's last stand was set in motion. The infiltration begins. The human strike team dropped from orbit, their ships flying low through the burning skies of Xalxora Prime. The once great capital of the Dominion was in ruins. Rebel forces had already breached the outer defenses, and Xalxur soldiers were fighting for survival. But deep below the surface, the real battle was about to begin. The commandos landed near a hidden entrance, slipping into the underground tunnels unnoticed. The deeper they went, the more they saw signs of desperation. Xalxur soldiers abandoning their posts. Warlords arguing in panic. A city built on absolute power, now full of fear. But the humans didn't have time to stop. They had a mission to complete. And the clock was ticking. The final battle underground. As the human team reached the central control room, alarms blared. The Xalxur had found them. A squad of elite Xalxur warriors rushed in, their armor gleaming, weapons drawn. The leader of the human team, Captain Ryan Hale, tightened his grip on his rifle. Here they come. Blaster fire erupted in the control room. The humans fought with precision and speed, moving like ghosts between the shadows. One by one, the Xalxur fell. But more kept coming. And the Doomsday Weapon was still counting down. Ryan knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, before Earth was doomed. He ran to the control console, his fingers flying over the alien interface. Come on," he muttered. Then, a deep, inhuman voice echoed behind him. "You are too late, human." Ryan spun around, and standing there was Xyroth-Kal himself. The final duel. Xyroth-Kal was massive, his armor glowing with energy. He stepped forward, claws unsheathing. "You think your kind can stop us?" he snarled. "You think your little war means anything?" Ryan raised his weapon. "No," he said, "but I think it means everything to you." Then they charged. The battle was brutal. Ryan dodged, weaved, struck back, using every ounce of human training to survive. Xyroth-Kal was stronger, faster, and full of rage. But Ryan was smarter. He led Xyroth-Kal away from the control console, drawing him toward an unstable power core. At the last second, Ryan dived aside, and Zyrothcal slammed into the energy field. There was a blinding flash, and the High Lord of the Xal'Zur was no more. Victory or extinction. Ryan stumbled back to the console, bleeding, exhausted. The countdown had reached 10 seconds. He slammed a device onto the panel, a human-made virus. It uploaded instantly. The countdown froze at 3 seconds. The doomsday weapon shut down. A deep rumble filled the chamber as the entire facility began to collapse. Ryan grabbed his communicator. Mission complete. Get us out of here. The team extracted just in time, their ships blasting into orbit as the underground fortress collapsed in flames. And with it, the last hope of the Xal'Zur Dominion. The end of an empire. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Zyrothcal was dead. The doomsday weapon was destroyed. The Xal'Zur Dominion had fallen. The greatest empire in galactic history was no more. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species they had once called weak, the species they had tried to erase, the species that had now conquered the stars. Suspense for the next part. Will the remaining Xal'Zur surrender or seek revenge? How will humanity handle its new power? What does the future hold for the galaxy? The aftermath of war. The Xal'Zur Dominion was gone. Their empire, once thought to be unstoppable, had fallen. Their fleets were destroyed, their leaders dead, and their worlds in chaos. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was free from their rule, and the ones who had done the impossible, humanity. But the war was not over yet. The remnants of the Xal'Zur, scattered across the galaxy, the last survivors of the Dominion tried to regroup. Some Xal'Zur warlords fled into deep space, hoping to rebuild their lost empire in the shadows. Others refused to accept defeat, launching desperate last attacks against human and rebel forces. And some surrendered. For the first time, Xal'Zur generals knelt before those they had once called inferior. They had no choice. They were no longer conquerors. They were refugees. And the galaxy had no mercy for them. Humanity faces a new challenge. On Earth, inside the United Earth Command Center, General Elias Carter stood before a war-torn holographic map of the galaxy. The war was won. But now, they faced a new challenge. What happens next? An officer approached. "Sir, the rebel factions are asking for a meeting. They want to discuss the future of the galaxy." Carter nodded. "Of course they do. The Xal'Zur are gone, and now everyone wants to know who's in charge." The officer hesitated. "Sir, they're asking if humanity is going to replace the Dominion." Carter frowned. That was the real question, wasn't it? Humanity had won. But now, with the strongest fleet, the most advanced weapons, and a galaxy looking for leadership, would humanity become the next empire? Or would they step back and let the galaxy decide its own fate? For the first time in history, humans had the power to shape the future of the stars. And the entire galaxy was watching. The Galactic Summit. On a neutral planet, representatives from dozens of species gathered for the first time without the fear of Xal'Zur rule. The air was tense. Former slaves of the Dominion wanted justice. Newly freed civilizations wanted independence. And some feared that humanity, the species that had destroyed the Xal'Zur, might take their place as rulers. When General Carter stepped forward, the room fell silent. Every leader, every ambassador, every soldier from across the galaxy waited for his words. And what he said next would change history. The choice of humanity. Carter looked across the room. "I know why you're all here," he said. "You're wondering if humanity will replace the Xal'Zur, if we will use our victory to take power." He let the words hang in the air. "But let me be clear, we did not fight this war to rule." Murmurs spread across the room. Carter continued, "Humanity fought because we refused to kneel, and we believe no species should ever have to kneel again." The murmurs grew louder. Some were relieved. Some were suspicious, and some still feared what humanity could do. Carter knew that trust would take time. But one thing was certain. The age of Zalzur tyranny was over, and the age of freedom had begun. The last war criminals. Even as peace talks began, one final mission remained. Not all the Zalzur warlords had surrendered. Some had escaped, and they were still dangerous. Deep in the unknown regions of space, the last surviving Zalzur warlords gathered in secret. They were few. They were broken. But they were not finished. One of them, a scared and battle-worn general, stepped forward. "The humans think they have won," he growled. "But we are Zalzur. We do not fade into history." He turned to his warriors. "We will rebuild. We will return. And when we do, we will burn Earth to the ground." The others roared in agreement. The war was over. But in the darkness, the seeds of the next conflict had already been planted, and humanity's true test was yet to come. Suspense for the next part. Will the Zalzur warlords attempt a comeback? Can humanity unite the galaxy, or will old grudges return? What dangers still lurk in the unknown regions? The shadows of revenge. The war was over. The Zalzur dominion was dead. But in the far reaches of space, in the shadows beyond known star systems, the last remnants of the once mighty empire gathered. They were few, but they were not broken. They had one purpose left: vengeance. The Zalzur War Council. On a hidden world, deep inside an asteroid belt, the last Zalzur warlords held a secret meeting. The chamber was dark. The air was thick with anger and desperation. These were the ones who had escaped the fall of their empire. They had lost everything: their fleets, their homeworld, their power, and all because of one enemy: humanity. A scared general, Varrock Khan, slammed his fist against the table. "We cannot let this stand," he growled. "The humans have destroyed us, humiliated us. Are we to crawl into the void and disappear?" A silence filled the room. Then another voice, cold and sharp, spoke from the shadows. "No," said Lord Xyravel, the last surviving member of the Zalzur High Council. "We will not disappear." She leaned forward, her reptilian eyes glowing. "We will do what the humans did to us. We will study them, learn from them, use their own tactics against them." She paused, her voice turning into a whisper. "We will become their greatest nightmare." The warlords listened. Then slowly they nodded. The Zalzur were not gone. They were evolving. And their revenge had just begun. The assassination attempt. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Elias Carter had become a symbol of victory. The man who led humanity to its greatest triumph. And the Zalzur wanted him dead. One night, as he stood on the balcony of the United Earth Command Center, he looked out over the city. For the first time in years, Earth was at peace. But deep down, he knew peace never lasted forever. And then, a sound. A whisper of movement. Carter spun around just in time to see a figure emerge from the shadows. A Zalzur assassin. Fast, silent, deadly. A blade flashed toward his throat. But Carter had fought too many battles to die so easily. He dodged, twisting the assassin's arm, sending the blade flying. The Zalzur warrior hissed, striking again. They fought in the darkness, quick, brutal, and deadly. And then, with a final strike, Carter drove his knife into the assassin's chest. The Zalzur warrior gasped, eyes wide. But before he died, he whispered something that sent a chill down Carter's spine. "This is only the beginning." And then he was gone. The hunt begins. The next morning, Carter called an emergency meeting. The attack had proven one thing. The Zalzur were still out there. And they weren't done fighting. An intelligence officer stepped forward. "Sir, we've intercepted encrypted transmissions from deep space. It looks like the Zalzur remnants are reorganizing." Carter's jaw tightened. They're planning something. The officer nodded. Yes, sir. And based on the data, they've changed their strategy. The Excelsior were no longer trying to conquer worlds. They were using stealth, sabotage, and infiltration. They had learned from humanity. And now, they were playing by human rules. Carter looked around the room. The war should have been over. But the Excelsior refused to let go of their hatred. And that meant only one thing. Humanity had to hunt them down before it was too late. A deadly new enemy. In the deep void, Cyravel watched as the last Excelsior ships gathered. But these were not warships. They were ghost ships, stealth craft designed for surgical strikes and sabotage. For centuries, the Excelsior had relied on overwhelming force. Now, they would fight like humans, strike from the darkness, attack and vanish. They would become the monsters in the night, the nightmare that humanity never saw coming. Cyravel turned to her soldiers. The humans took our empire, she said. Now we will take everything from them. Her claws curled into a fist. They will never know peace again. And with that, the new Excelsior War began. Suspense for the next part. Can humanity stop the Excelsior before they strike again? How will Earth defend itself from an enemy that fights in the shadows? What is the Excelsior's ultimate revenge plan? The final hunt. The Excelsior Dominion was gone, but its ghost still haunted the galaxy. They no longer fought with massive fleets or overwhelming armies. Now, they struck from the shadows. Assassins, saboteurs, silent killers. They had turned into a nightmare that never left humanity's mind. And if they couldn't rule the galaxy, they would burn it down instead. The war in the shadows. The Excelsior survivors had changed. They no longer marched in the open. They infiltrated, planted bombs in space stations, hijacked ships, turned allies against each other. They had learned from humanity. Now they were using humanity's own tactics against them. And Earth. Earth was struggling to keep up. Across the galaxy, explosions rocked human colonies. Entire fleets were hacked and disabled before they could even fire a shot. A new message spread across the stars. You destroyed our empire. Now we will destroy your future. It was a different kind of war, and humanity had to adapt or perish. The birth of the Ghost Fleet. General Elias Carter stood in the underground war room, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots flashed everywhere. Excelsior attacks growing daily. Humanity had to strike back. But how do you fight an enemy that never shows its face? Carter turned to his officers. It's time we stop playing defense, he said. We need to take the fight to them. A scientist stepped forward. Sir, we've been working on something, a new kind of fleet. The room went silent. Then the hologram changed. A new class of human warships appeared. Ships with stealth technology, AI-driven targeting systems, and cyber warfare capabilities. These ships don't fight like our old fleets, the scientist said. They hunt, they sabotage, they strike and disappear. Carter smiled. Good, he said, because that's exactly what we need. And thus, the Ghost Fleet was born. The hunt begins. The first Ghost Fleet ships were launched into the void. Their mission: track down the last Excelsior warlords and eliminate them. One by one, human operatives infiltrated Excelsior bases, disabled their communications, and shut down their operations. Every time the Excelsior tried to strike, the Ghost Fleet was already there, waiting. The war had changed. Now, it wasn't about who had the biggest fleet. It was about who was smarter. And no one in the galaxy had mastered that better than humanity. The final stand of the Excelsior, deep in an asteroid field, on the last hidden Excelsior stronghold, Lord Cyravel stood before her remaining forces. Her warriors were ready to die. She looked at them and spoke with quiet fury. For centuries, we were the rulers of the stars, she said, and now we are nothing. But we will not fade into history. We will take as many humans with us as we can. A soldier stepped forward. My lady, the humans have found us. Their ships are already inbound. Cyril narrowed her eyes. Then we fight. To the last breath. And so, the last battle of the Xalzur began. The end of the war. The Ghost Fleet struck hard and fast. Human operatives infiltrated the Xalzur base, taking out key defenses. Stealth fighters eliminated warlords before they could even give orders. One by one, the last remnants of the Xalzur were wiped out. And finally, standing in the ruins of her last fortress, Cyril faced her fate. As human soldiers surrounded her, she laughed bitterly. "You think this is over," she said. "You think you've won." General Carter stepped forward, his weapon drawn. "It's over," he said. She spat at his feet. "You're fools. The galaxy will never accept you. They will always fear you. One day, someone else will rise, and when they do, they will come for you." Carter stared at her. "Maybe," he said, "but it won't be you." And with that, the last Xalzur leader fell. The war was over. For good. The future of the galaxy. With the Xalzur finally gone, a new era began. Humanity was no longer just another species. They were now one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But unlike the Xalzur, they did not rule through fear. They built alliances. They helped rebuild what the Dominion had destroyed. And for the first time in history, the galaxy was free. But Carter knew one thing. Peace never lasts forever. Somewhere out there, in the darkness of space, a new enemy was watching, waiting. And when they came, humanity would be ready. Because Earth had proven one thing. They were not prey. They were the hunters. Epilogue. A new threat. In a distant system, beyond explored space, a satellite picked up a strange signal. It was not human. And it was not Xalzur. The signal contained a single chilling message. "We have been watching. We are coming." And just like that, the cycle of war was about to begin again. Final thoughts. The Xalzur are gone, but is another enemy rising? How will humanity handle its newfound power? What secrets does the galaxy still hold?